Mute is a new Netflix original movie that's directed by Duncan Jones and stars Paul Rudd, Justin Theroux, and Alexander Skarsgard. Now, I really like Duncan Jones's first two movies, Moon and Source Code. More specifically Moon, because of what he was able to achieve and accomplish on such a small budget. But either way, his first two movies are really, really good. I haven't seen Warcraft, so I can't really tell you what I think about that. But to be honest, it doesn't really look like I'm missing much. I mean, I'm not bothered whether I see it or not, and I probably won't see it. But his first two movies are really, really good, which is why I went into Mute really excited, as this was a return to the sci-fi genre that made him popular. And unfortunately, I came out of Mute rather disappointed, because it's a bit of a mess. Now, the plot of the movie is fairly straightforward. You have Leo, the main character, played by Alexander Skarsgard, who, when he was young, had his voice box completely destroyed, but unfortunately, because his family is Amish, they didn't allow any of the doctors and nurses to fix his voice box because it was against their beliefs. So he spent his entire life being mute, hence the title of the movie. Fast forward 30 years and he is now a bartender in a nightclub, and he has a girlfriend who's got blue hair. Can't quite remember her name, but you know, they're a thing. And the rest of the movie is pretty much the girlfriend goes missing and he's trying to look for her, and it's represented in what is supposed to be a thriller noir kind of style. But it doesn't exactly work that well, because a lot of the scenes in this movie just don't go anywhere. They just kind of drag for a while. I mean, I wouldn't say this movie is slow-paced. Well, it is fairly slow-paced, but I wouldn't say it's slow and drags. Instead, what you have is a load of scenes that just don't go anywhere, and it makes the movie feel slow rather than actually being slow. Do you get what I mean? I'm probably not explaining this in the best possible way, but if you understood what I meant, good. So yeah, because a lot of these scenes actually take a while to get to the point of the scene, it makes the movie feel a lot longer than it actually is. Now, the runtime of this movie is actually 2 hours and 6 minutes, which you could say is long enough as it is. But the weird thing is, Blade Runner 2049 was 2 hours and 43 minutes, if I remember rightly. But it went by incredibly quickly, in my opinion. Yes, there were a few moments that did feel slow and did drag a little, but overall, I was thoroughly entertained from start to finish, and it felt like the whole thing went by at a pretty reasonable pace. But because a lot of the scenes in Mute don't really go anywhere, it feels like a 3-hour movie, despite the fact that it is actually a 2-hour movie. Also, while we're talking about the plot, I might as well discuss one of my major gripes with the movie, and that is the fact that in the movie you are shown pretty much two major storylines. You're shown the storyline of Leo looking for his girlfriend, and you are also shown the storyline of Cactus and Duck, played by Justin Theroux and Paul Rudd. And unfortunately, they feel like two completely separate things. The story with Leo is somewhat interesting, but feels like it's in a completely different movie to the story that contains Paul Rudd and Justin Theroux, which I actually found to be the more interesting story, despite the fact that it is kind of later revealed that they are sort of the villains of the movie. I suppose I'm at the point where I might as well talk about the performances in this movie. I didn't quite like Alexander Skarsgard as Leo. I really didn't. I thought his performance was pretty bland. And I know you can't really do much when your character is mute, but at least show some, a variation of facial expressions, for crying out loud. Throughout the majority of the movie, he just has one facial expression, and it is this. Yeah, he doesn't change this facial expression for the entire movie. Only towards the end of the movie does his character start to change ever so slightly and actually became a lot more interesting. But unfortunately, it's towards the end of the movie. So just when he's getting interesting, the movie ends, which I thought was quite annoying. That being said, the two best performances in the entire movie easily go to Justin Theroux and Paul Rudd as Duck and Cactus. I easily think that these two carry the entire movie and make it their own. They are really likeable characters. Their banter between each other is quite funny at times, and I really did like their kind of characters and what Duncan Jones decided to do with them. The one thing I didn't like about their characters, though, and unfortunately it happens quite a lot, is the fact that they switch between emotions quite quickly, and it is rather jarring at times. For example, there is one scene in particular where Cactus and Duck are arguing at each other, and Cactus is literally at Duck's throat. And then within like a couple of seconds, they're best friends again, and they're going out shopping. And I'm like, Jesus Christ, that's like the third time they've done that in this movie. They'll be at each other's throats, and then they'll instantly be best friends again. I'm just like, you know, show some consistency, for crying out loud. It would make sense if one scene they were arguing, and then the next scene they were maybe starting to become friends again, but don't just make it happen instantly within the same scene. It just is. I thought it was rather jarring every single time it happened, and it just kind of frustrated me more as the movie went on. I suppose the only other positive I can really squeeze out of this movie is the fact that aesthetically it does look very good. It's very stylish, it's very cool. But that being said, at times it does feel like a low-budget version of Blade Runner, and you're going to hear people compare this movie to Blade Runner quite a lot, because aesthetically it does have a lot of similarities. Personally, I think both Blade Runner and Blade Runner 2049 are much superior movies to Mute, both visually and story-wise. But I can see what they were trying to do with Mute, but unfortunately it just doesn't quite pack the same punch as something like, I don't know, Blade Runner 2049. I was really looking forward to this movie, but unfortunately it just kind of fell flat in more ways than one, which is why I'm going to give Mute a 5.5 out of 10. When comparing it to other Netflix original movies, though, I would say it's definitely nowhere near as bad as Bright. But it's also nowhere near as good as other movies like Mudbound or Okja. Hell, I would even say that the Cloverfield Paradox was even slightly more enjoyable than this movie. Because even though the Cloverfield Paradox is not a good, consistent movie, I still found it to be fun and entertaining for what it was. Mute just kind of goes nowhere at any time soon, which is why I didn't really find much to enjoy with the movie, on top of all of the criticisms that I have with it. So guys, that was my review of Mute. I hope you enjoyed it. If you enjoyed the video, then give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Bye.